Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third chat of Meet the Lindens. And today I'm going to be talking to Linden. But I'm going to start off before we do anything else with checking you can all hear me on the different regions. So, can I hear it from Fantasy? Can you hear me on Fantasy? Can you hear me on Astound? Excellent. Can you hear me on, what's the other one? Awesome. Fantastic. Oz, would you like to say everyone to check that people can hear you too?
Well, I hope everyone can. It's supposed to work for the same for both of us.
Okay, you just broke up a little. For me. Was that okay? For everyone else? Oz, can you say a little more?
Testing. I'm looking forward to chatting with Safia today.
That's brilliant. Okay, so let's start. Hello, everyone. I'm really pleased to welcome Oz, or perhaps I should say welcome back, Oz, because we have talked before. Prior to joining Second Life, Oz spent many years developing all sorts of networking code, eventually including contributions to the development of HTTP, and from there to open source SIP, which was voice over IP. Internet telephony turned into something of a corporate nightmare, so he looked around for something more fun. And a friend who was working at the lab recruited Oz to help with the open source program. Since he'd already played a little with Second Life, he thought that certainly met the fun criteria, but he had no idea how much fun it was going to be. 9 years later, Oz is responsible for Second Life engineering and having the time of his life. He's proud to be working on a product that means so much to so many people.
Yeah, and I did a cut and paste error when I sent that little blurb. It's 10 years now, and it's still
Aha!
I had my
Hang on.
10th anniversary last month.
So, Oz, I have to say your appearance has changed over the years. For the longest time, you looked rather like the kindly priest of a mystical order. Now the new look is, well, more ninja warrior mentor. Is this the pressure of moving to the cloud, or does it have anything to do with being part of Bidder Linden Bald for Relay for Life?
I just got tired of people giving me a hard time about the fact that I never changed my look. And actually, I really like this coat. It's
Oh,
cool.
it's awesome. Yeah, yeah, the whole look. I love the moustache and beard combination.
Well, Whirly Fizzle gets credit for having found those for me. I'm a terrible shopper.
Well, he
In
is
real
very
life
good.
too, actually.
Well, he is very good at things. I see that from when your photos for the poster were taken, your hair has grown somewhat.
Well, I'm really pleased to be able to have participated in the Relay for Life Bid the Lindens Bald event for the
Mhm.
I think 3rd year in a row, and having lost for 2 in a row. But it's a great cause, and I'm happy to have put it in. But the deal was to be bald for a month, and it
Right.
was just over that ago. So I decided I could have a little short hair today.
Okay. So that now that Sansar has gone, has your team here in Second Life expanded, or is it still the same dedicated group?
Well, it's a very dedicated group, period. Uh,
Mm.
we did uh, we did manage to convince a few people from Sansar to come work on Second Life. And in fact, we had a couple that came to us and said they really wanted to do that rather than continue with Sansar's adventures.
Mhm.
And we're delighted to have them. We've also done a little bit of hiring since then, but um, and have a couple of open positions actually in our operations team. So if you know any really good Linux system administrators who want to work on the back end of Second Life, uh, we need them.
Oddly enough, I do, just down the road from you as well.
Well, we send them our way, please.
Okay. Right. What impact has the pandemic had on your operations team?
Oh, it's been pretty minimal. We engineering, including the operations team and the developers, was already very distributed. In addition to having contributors in our three major offices, well, I'm sorry, we have four major offices: Atlanta, Seattle, Boston, and San Francisco. Uh, and we had developers in three of those, and we also had a lot of people, including myself, who are what we call moonlabbers, which means we work from home
Mm,
as a normal thing. Probably, I didn't actually count up the numbers, but it was probably somewhere between a third and a half of the total engineering staff that was primarily work from home people even before the pandemic. So
mm,
we're completely used to dealing or working across time zones and working remotely. We use do a lot of meeting in Second Life. We also use video chat for of various kinds uh, for a lot of our work. Uh,
mm.
the Probably the biggest single impact is that we're not getting together for our big summer picnic this year. So
Oh, that's a shame.
yes, it is a
Maybe
shame.
maybe the residents could throw you a virtual picnic. I'm sure that they could design a nice environment and put out lots of good virtual food.
Yeah, I'm sure they could. But we've pretty much made the transition to everybody working from home more or less seamlessly.
Mm. Well, that's great. I don't think we've noticed any impact on the resident side.
Well,
So,
it's things have gotten busier. Uh,
yes. Well, there's been a lot of returners, haven't there?
there have, yes, and a lot of new people as well.
Mm,
So
which is great.
yeah, we love it.
So, I'm going to be talking about the migration to the cloud, or to put it in more technical terms, to AWS. But first, I'm sure a lot of people are like me and not entirely clear on why this is a good thing, or why this is a thing that is good to happen. Can you explain what the migration is and why it's going to benefit Second Life?
Sure. So historically, we have operated our collection of servers the way most medium size and above companies did for most of the history of the computing business, which is we had literally our own big rooms full of computers. In our cases, primarily in co-location centers, big buildings that are dedicated just to that. And we have a cage in a great big building that's got lots of redundant power and cooling and networking and so forth, where all of our servers were. And we actually had to invent a great deal of how to manage really large collections of servers
Mm.
because Second Life grew so fast at the beginning, right? And we had to build a lot of capability that at that time there weren't standard solutions for. And the industry has moved on. Um,
Right.
Amazon kind of pioneered the public cloud business to a large extent, but it has picked up all over the place. And uh, moving to those environments allows us to take advantage of better capabilities in a bunch of ways in terms of how to manage the systems. And in fact, we get to offload a little bit of that to Amazon,
Mm.
and that means that we can put our energy and our focus into developing the particular unique features of Second Life rather than spending time worrying about how the network cabling is being run through the racks in the ceiling.
Mm.
So it allows us to focus on our product more and less on the minutia of the systems. We also just hadn't upgraded our systems in a long time, and
Mm.
so we had a choice between spending a lot of money and time and effort doing a whole new generation of servers, or
Mm.
we could just begin renting the latest and greatest stuff from Amazon. And after doing a lot of cost modeling, we decided that the latter was the better long-term choice.
Yeah, because we talk about the cloud as though somehow it's all magically floating above us, but they're all just servers somewhere, aren't they?
They are, sure. And we get to, but for example, if we decided that a particular service, say, I don't know, pick something, the bake service, or um, needed a better hardware capability than it we had it running on
Mm.
um, in in the in our own facility with our own hardware, we'd have had to go out and identify what differences we wanted and pick the new machines and test them and
Mm.
figure out how to manage that particular new machine in our environment and so forth, and do a lot of work. Um, Once the cloud migration is complete, if we have a situation like that, we'll just be able to look at the catalog of system types that's available from Amazon and say, we want to switch from this one to that one. And the next day, everything will be on the new hardware and it'll be working just the way it was before,
That
only
is
presumably better.
that is wonderful, yes. And that gives you time to do a lot of other exciting things, some
Right.
of which might be requested later on today. We'll have to wait and see. So, how much of a priority is it for you this year to get this migration done?
Well, one of the little company practices that we have here is that we set quarterly goals for ourselves, each individual.
Mhm.
And we pick, what are the most important things I expect to do this quarter. Um, I have three this quarter. They are uplift Second Life,
Yeah.
uplift Second Life, and uplift Second Life.
Okay, good. Not just the top priority then, the second and third as well. Probably
Uh,
going down to about number 10?
yeah, yeah, pretty much. I stopped at three. It seemed like enough.
Okay. I do want to quickly ask a question that has come in from Xfile, which is once moved to AWS, what will happen to those of us that rent full regions or parcels by real estate companies? Will we only be buying and renting directly from Linden Lab by then?
Well, that's really a business question, but that is how we structure the business of the product,
Mm,
and therefore, in some sense, more Patch's question than mine. But in fact, I don't expect there's any reason to suppose that that will change.
right.
Um,
Okay. Um, Another quick question coming in. Eric Mondoran has asked, after Uplift is finished, do you think the lab might eventually be able to offer regions larger or smaller even than the current 256 by 256, and or offer regions or parcels where the land area is completely decoupled from the land impact allotment in terms of pricing, tied to actual storage bandwidth? So someone could have their wide open spaces with more land but use fewer LI and pay less than someone with the same land area but using a lot more LI.
Well, land impact is a very complicated question. I don't think I want to. We could spend a whole hour on the interesting characteristics of making adjustments to land impact. And
Mm,
while we've thought about that a little bit, it hasn't been a focus of a lot of our efforts lately. We have done some experiments with supporting regions that are larger. Um, we
mm,
haven't. I don't. I don't recall anybody trying to build smaller ones, but that's probably actually easier. The but I don't think that we don't have sort of any firm plans on the roadmap to do that. But there are a lot of ways that the product could expand once we get into the cloud in
mm,
allow us to offer some kinds of products that we don't offer now.
right. So can you give us an update on how the migration is going?
Well, it's pretty stressful, but it's going well. The For example, all of the inventory databases were successfully moved. Actually, twice. We copied them to a whole new set of cloud servers, and then because of some networking changes, we had to copy them again to a whole different ones. Um, and that went off completely without a hitch. As far
Mm,
as I could tell, nobody noticed either one of those moves. That
mhm,
happened several months ago now. And a while ago now, I don't usually like to leak when we do things, so I wait until after we've moved things to talk about it. But it's been a while ago now. We moved the service that sits between the viewer and the actual inventory database and provides all the data to the viewer. Uh, that has been running for some time now, entirely uplifted. And again, the transition was really, really smooth, and
that's wonderful.
I'm really excited about that. And we've got other things that are in progress, and there's a lot of backend stuff that users don't interact with directly that we use to manage the service that's already been
Mhm.
uplifted too.
So how long is the migration likely to take?
It
I know a
says
lot
on
of
my
people.
plan that we'll be out of the colo at the end of the year.
That's great.
So,
At which point people can start buying regions again.
oh, yes, right. Once we've moved, the we will be able to unfreeze our regions.
Mm.
So, needless to say, there are a lot of people asking me how soon that's going to be. Um,
Especially since Patch revealed the new Linden homes.
yeah, yes,
Yeah, yes. You should be careful. I can see tinies lining up with their mini pitchforks.
yep, yep.
Yeah.
Well, the folks in the folks in the finance office would very much like me to be able to sell new regions too.
Yes, coming at you from both sides. I'm sorry. Okay. Um,
It's a great problem to have. I mean,
yeah,
if you've got to have a problem, having more demand than you can satisfy is much better than the reverse.
it is, isn't it? Will AWS improve things like loading times and bandwidth compared to current hardware, do you think? That's a
Well,
question.
the current servers, the majority of the current servers are something like 8-year-old technology. So compare those of you who've bought a PC in the last year, compare its performance to one that you had 8 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, I don't. We haven't done enough testing yet on the Uplift servers for simulator performance to begin having numbers to share.
Hmm.
I don't even have enough numbers to share with Ebe yet. Let's put it that
Right.
way. But there's every reason to believe that it should be better.
That's great. So I guess when you test, you'd like to test on something. I mean, it would be quite interesting to get the figures from events like this one, wouldn't it? Once.
Right. Yes. And I think that one of the possibilities that we've talked about in as a possible product direction is
Hmm.
that today in our existing server fleet, we're basically paying for those servers 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they're kind of a fixed cost. So,
Right.
but in the new world, they will they're a variable cost. We can get more of them if we need them, and we can get rid of ones we don't need anymore.
Right.
So in theory, for example, we could say right now, instead of getting X numbers of regions running on a particular server, you could pay extra and get a server that's only running 1/4 X regions, right?
Hmm.
And therefore have more cycles available to keep your performance good. And of course, pay a premium for it. But
Right.
we'll see how the the product part of this is, again, not really my problem,
Hmm.
mostly. But there are some interesting possibilities, right? Like another one would be today, it makes no sense at all economically for us to say, sell a region that's only running on weekends, right? Or only running
Right.
during the week, right?
Yeah.
Because we have to pay for the box all week long anyway,
Hmm.
and we can't really use it. But in the future, that might be possible. So depending on what the product folks decide about how
Hmm.
to structure the way we charge for things, that's something that we in engineering could build for them if they decided they wanted to do that.
Okay, I'm going to say, people, can you ask your questions in open chat rather than sending me individual IMs? I'm not going to be able to read individual IMs, but people are sending me uh, a special IM of all the questions that I'm going to be reading. And I believe, quick sidetrack, we have a very new mole here. It's a mole. And Kenny Luckless suggested I welcomed her. So welcome, Itza. Hope you enjoy being a mole, and hope we see you on Friday. Okay, so going back to the cloud, and hopefully people can ask the questions in open chat now. Thanks. I was asked about things like region crossings and group chats. I guess you haven't been able to get the data on all this yet.
We
You
can
haven't
do
got any
region
detail.
crossings, but no, we don't have any quantitative data on
Okay.
that yet. Uh,
But at least you expect it to be as good as it is now and hopefully even better.
that is certainly the goal, and we expect to be able to achieve that.
Right. Someone is asking, will you get rid of region crossings? Can't say sim crossings, they're not sim crossings, they're region crossings.
Oh, good. We've got you trained.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Uh, well, um, you can. nobody forces you to do region crossings. We can't make the world one big seamless thing. That's
Mm,
just, it's a pretty fundamental part of the Second Life architecture right now.
yeah. Okay. So what other viewer improvements and changes can we expect in the next year? I'm sorry, I'm now asking you to take your eyes off the road ahead and kind of look down some attractive side streets.
Right. No, no, we do have some people that are working on that. So we've got um, the big items in the viewer. We've got some serious rework of the rendering pipeline.
Mhm,
As some people will know, Apple has announced that at some time in the future that they have carefully not specified, uh,
mhm,
they will stop supporting OpenGL, which is the technology we use for the graphics rendering. We obviously want to continue supporting Macs into the indefinite future. So we're going to have to make adjustments to that. And so we've got a team that's looking at what is the right way to do that. While we're at it, we will be attempting to improve both the fidelity of the graphics and their performance.
mm.
So I that's not a real short-term deliverable. It's a big, big project. But it is definitely something we're going to be spending time on,
Mm.
and hopefully at some point there will be things you can see out of that effort. Um, we're also working on some usability improvements in the viewer. Um, we've gotten some good things in the pipeline from contributions from outside that we're working on. We've got a project going on now to improve the caching and fetching texture and object fetching performance of the viewer that
Mm.
I have very high hopes for. I've seen some early demos and it's pretty impressive stuff. So there's quite a lot going on, and other
I
proposals I'm not at liberty to talk about yet.
Yeah, I've had some questions come in about Tasia Mercury says that the SL graphics engine is pretty much an artifact, I think, it's, by graphic standards. Has Linden Lab thought about updating to the Unreal Engine 4 Plus? And Blackheart, the Big Bad Wolf resident, wow, what a name, has asked, will Second Life viewers at some point use more CPU cores than it is now, since more cores and CPUs are becoming the norm?
Yeah, he's right about that, and I hope so is the answer.
Right.
It will certainly be a goal of that project to be able to leverage multiple cores more effectively than we do today. That's that's one of the things that uh, we have been evolving the the Second Life viewer for 18 plus years now. Uh, it
Mhm.
was it was started before the Second Life was open. Um, and they're having the opportunity to sort of take a step back and redo a big major part of it like this gives us the opportunity to redo things. I do want to say about that, and it's maybe this will be the headline for the whole interview, and I hope that's not the case, but um, there are a lot of people. One of the challenges that we have right now is always is on any change is that there are a lot of people running really old systems,
Mm,
um, and there is a limit to how far back you can keep supporting things and have it actually be good for your product. So we have to think about real hard about what we can support. And
mm,
one of the things that's going out in a viewer that went out uh, today, I think, is we're measuring some more fine-grained detail about what our customers' systems can and can't support, uh,
Right.
so that we can make good decisions about that. Um, but and I'll throw in my usual pitch here. If you're on Windows and you're not running Windows 10 fully patched up to the latest stuff, and you're not running in 64-bit mode, you will have a much better experience if you upgrade. Much better. The crash rate on Windows 10 fully upgraded on a 64-bit system is hugely better than it is on any other Windows version. So, uh, upgrade if you can. But we'll do our best to continue to support things as much as we possibly can.
Now, I've got a question here that I think I know the answer to, because
I like easy ones.
this
That's
is
fine.
a kind of question about something that ties in with what you were just talking about in a kind of slightly convoluted way. Gordon Woodside is asking why megaprims that are being used for nothing but griefing regions, why can't they be removed from the asset server? My answer would be they're probably not just being used for griefing, although that may appear so, but if you remove them from the asset server, a significant proportion of buildings will collapse, which happened once before. Is that true?
Yeah,
Or
that did happen. It was before my time, but
mm,
I am regaled by older hands than myself with stories of the day that the people all fell out of the sky because the mega prims that were supporting their skyboxes all went away.
yeah,
Um, so, um,
that that's the trouble, isn't it? That certain improvements, if you kind of touch them, um, you break something else which maybe you hadn't realized was incredibly important to a lot of people.
yeah, yeah, and we're we're always sensitive to how any change we make is likely to break anything old. There
Mm,
are some things that where we're, from time to time where we have to make changes that are not um, 100% backwards compatible. For example, we just finished the EAT project, and while people on some of the third-party viewers haven't yet got that feature,
mm,
um, it doesn't look exactly the same as it did before. It gives you a lot of new capabilities that you can do, and some things look quite a lot better.
mm,
Um, but uh, it really wasn't possible to change to add all the new features for how the world is lit and so forth without having some effect on the way existing stuff looks. Um, we tried to strike as good a balance as we could, but that's kind of a big part of what we have to do whenever we're contemplating a new thing.
yeah, or even updating an old thing.
That's right. That's right. Even relatively, um, I mean, I often say that every time we make a change, there are people who don't notice that we make a change, and there are people who say it's the best thing we ever did, and there are people who say it's the worst thing we ever did, and then there are people who say, yeah, that was all right, but you should have been done doing this other thing. So we we get all four reactions no matter what we do.
Yeah,
The proportions differ just a little bit, but uh,
I I know that Marion McCann, um, when she did her flags installation at SL9B, she her note said, this change came in at this point, and people declared that Second Life was finished, ruined. And
yes,
then she moves on to the next flag. And so every time people kind of think it's going to break the grid and it'll never be the same and never work.
Yeah, it makes us a little nervous when we do something big and no one predicts that it's the end of Second Life as a result. So, if
Mhm.
those are in a perverse sort of way a little bit reassuring.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I've got a few more questions that people have sent in to me earlier. Then I'm going to change the subject slightly. And finally, I'm going to pick up from questions that have been asked in local chat. There's been a lot of questions in local chat, so I'm sorry, guys, but I don't think we'll have time to answer everything. Do you have a hard stop?
No,
Uh,
no, no.
Oz? Okay. Well, even so, 3 days' time might be, like a bit long for a chat.
Right, right. Uh, I get I get pretty cranky if I get hungry, so you probably don't want to go that long. But
Yeah, that sounds fair enough. Okay, um, let's kick off. Vulcan Viper has said, could we finally oh, no, hang on, I've got a few more. Um, what about mobile? Is there going to be anything for residents to test this year?
oh, I think this year is a pretty safe bet. Yes. Uh,
That's
we have
wonderful.
we have a good team working on both iOS and Android.
Mhm,
The Android is a little behind. We started that later,
mhm,
but it's catching up. And I don't want to predict any dates because if I predict dates, that will mean that some new problem comes up, and I'll turn out to be wrong. But we're we're getting there. We've been doing some uh, testing with Lindens and a very small set of other people. It's not really sufficiently feature rich to ship it, but there are just a very small number of things that still need to be built, and then we can we can put those out. I suspect that the iOS one will end up shipping a little ahead of the Android one, but we'll see how that works out.
What about, VR headsets? Will we see support for those in Second Life again?
I would not expect that until that is, I wouldn't expect us to spend time trying to do that until after we've done the major rendering pipeline rebuild. Um,
Mhm,
and it will depend entirely on what kind of performance we're able to achieve when we do that, because the current rendering engine, um, in part for
mhm.
reasons your questioners have pointed out, just isn't up to uh, handling that.
Yeah. Talking about visual developments, Maddie Gynoid has asked, the Project 360 snapshot viewer was published in October 2016 and has been in that state ever since. Is there any chance that this viewer will be added to the main life second viewer after almost 4 years?
At some point, I'm
Hmm.
again, I'm not going to predict dates. It turns out that there are a couple of server side changes we need to make to really make that work well. And we snuck one of them in the Eat project. You can you may notice you can freeze the clouds now in Eep. So if you want to take a picture and you want to just get the clouds just right, there's a menu pick for doing that. Um, that
Aha.
and a few other things. Some people may remember a project from, I think it was oh I want to say 6 or 7 years ago, called
Hmm.
Project Interesting. Project Interesting was a pretty
Yes.
good performance improvement for Second Life, for the Second Life viewer.
Hmm.
What that was all about was the simulator not sending you information on stuff you couldn't see,
Hmm.
like the stuff that's behind you, right? Your camera is
Right.
facing in one direction. We don't bother telling you about what's moving around behind you. Well,
Right.
turns out that messes up the 360 pictures. You end up with
Ah.
you end up with, you know, 90 or 120 degrees of really good picture and then very spotty stuff for 50 degrees behind you. Um, and we need to make some adjustments so that the viewer will be able to say, "Hey, I'm about to do a 360 picture. Can you please give me the full stuff?" Right?
Mm.
And we have to do that in a way that keeps people from abusing it to overload the simulators, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a little bit of balancing act there. I wouldn't expect that to be high on our priority list until after the uplift is done. But
Yeah.
we are definitely not going to forget about that feature. Internally, it's
Mm.
very popular with Lindens. Um, Even the viewer that hasn't been brought fully up to date, we often do them in. You can sort of solve the object problem by standing carefully in one spot and turning
Mm.
around a couple of times so that you have seen everything, and then you can usually get a pretty good picture. But it's still
Mm.
a little too fiddly to be considered ready to ship as a standard viewer feature.
Right. So it's you could hopefully eventually a long way down the line make it something like high res photos which you can just turn on.
Yeah, something like that, right? And we're not going to lose track of that one.
Mm.
It's a good feature, and we will find a way to make it better.
Mhm. Talking going on with this visual developments, um, okay, the multi I guess counter Kitak's question about are there plans to improve the performance on multi-core processors? Because the frames per second is really bad with good graphics if there are a lot of avatars to show.
Yeah,
I
they're
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Um, it, where the new graphics pipeline will hopefully take much better advantage of multi-core processors and multiple
Mm,
processor machines.
right. The Vulcan Viper asks, could we finally see the alpha problem fixed? Um, I imagine the alpha problem is how we sometimes see a halo.
Well, I want to point out um, that this is a dilemma that I face all the time. The alpha problem. If
Hmm.
I were to do a search of our Jira database of problems that and just look for open issues that have alpha in them somewhere, I would probably find it would be at least dozens. It might be hundreds. I didn't
Right.
do the search, but uh, it is there are a bunch of problems that are in some way related to alphas. Um,
Mm,
Alphas are tricky. Alphas are really difficult for computers to do well. Um, so I'm afraid the alpha problem is so non-specific that I can't even begin to reasonably answer it. That
right.
having been said, there are a couple of bugs. There are a couple of alpha-related bugs that were introduced with EAP that are being very actively worked on right now. So
Mm,
those will get fixed.
right. Ah, good question here from Terra Volitant. Since you mentioned the JIRA, what would you say is the politest and most constructive way to try and get in contact about seeing LSL bug issues addressed that have languished or perhaps been forgotten about?
Well, let's see. We can start with I have a user group every Wednesday morning. Well, morning my time, and Simon and I'm usually there. Has one on Tuesdays. Uh, those exist specifically to talk about what people are concerned about, um, and we're glad to hear about it. Uh,
Mm,
the priorities are what they are. There are there's enough work to keep my staff busy for 15 years, easily, already known about and queued up. So um, we'll
So
and we're looking forward to doing that.
yeah.
But it's always a juggling act figuring out what it is we're going to work on at any given time.
Okay. Where and when is that? How best can we find out about those meetings?
If you look for user groups on the wiki.secondlife.com, you'll find a listing. There's one
Yeah.
for content creators. There's one for the web team does one. There's one that the governance team does. There's one. There's my Wednesday open development meeting. There's one for servers and scripting. That's the one that Simon usually runs.
Mm.
Um, it's there are a whole bunch of them, and we're delighted to have people come and talk with us about what they think is important. Um,
Okay, we seem to be having a sound problem. I'm getting a lot of comments that people are struggling with the sound. Can you give us just a minute and we'll see if we can fix it? I'm going to turn off my in-world voice and go to a back channel.
Safia, Max, and I are
Yeah,
switching streams now. Just keep going.
thank you, Max. Hello. Can you let us know when we're good to go again?
Yep, we should be good to go.
Okay. Hello again, everyone. Is that any better? Thanks. Are we back on awesome and fantasy? Excellent. Oz, can you say something?
testing 1, 2, 5.
Okay. Oh, someone has said now the YouTube stream is bad, but you may be picking up the end of the bad sound. Okay, great. Okay, good. Thanks. YouTube stream should now be fine. Okay. So one question, again, we're turning to sort of niggles, but this is an interesting one. It was raised with me by Kane Maven. Would it be possible to have point lighting that doesn't shine through walls, so that if you have a lamp on in the living room, it doesn't light up the garden through the back of it, through
Yeah.
the brick wall next to it? Yeah.
So this is in the questions that you sent me in advance, and I'm
Hmm.
happy you did because it gave me a chance to go and talk to my rendering team, and they said that would be really expensive in performance terms. It would be
Right.
hard, but it turns out there's a trick. Um,
Uh-huh.
we do we do prevent projectors from going through walls. So
Right.
you might be able to do that by using a projector for your light instead of just a point light, and it,
Ah.
it may solve the problem for you. So
Hmm.
um, you'll have to, they weren't able to confidently predict what the relative performance would be, but it might be worth if you've got a situation where you really you don't want light on one side of a wall and you do need it on the other. Um,
Hmm.
a projector may be the
A
solution
projector
you're
might
looking
be.
for.
Well, I don't think Kane's here, but I will certainly tell him. Now, Turning to sound rather than visuals, trader Whiplash Ballinger says, since Second Life was created, the codecs for shoutcast and icecast have been updated many times. In early years, there was no buffering or pauses in audio streams. Today, stations streaming Shoutcast version 2 and Icecast 2 have long buffering and restarts. The indication is the buffers are insufficient to handle the incoming data and therefore become starved. This problem is especially noticeable at large-scale events such as Relay for Life, Fantasy Fair, the Christmas Expo, where residents may cross several regions and parcel lines, which cause the stream connection to reset and the buffering to begin again, even though the parcel or region stream is the same. Is Linden Lab doing anything to resolve the issue? And he adds that he knows you're aware of it, as there have been several JIRA cases in the past few years.
Yeah, we did just upgrade the sound system, Fmod, to default release 2 default viewers ago. So if you haven't been upgrading your viewer, you might find that helps. I don't know about the buffering, the buffer starvation problem. It might be a little tricky to do that on region crossing boundaries because we don't necessarily know that it's the same stream when we get there. That is, we have to fade out the stream when we're leaving the region because we're leaving the region. But that might be an interesting. It has exact. He says somebody says that it has made it worse. That would be an interesting thing to investigate. And maybe I'll sic one of the QA people on that to see if they can provide us something quantitative. Usually problems like that, the trick is finding a way to reliably reproduce them. And if we can, the solution is usually not as difficult as all that.
Right. So, trader, hold on. Someone's going to look into it for you. Okay, Oz, let's turn to a different area of your work. How are relations going with third-party viewer developers?
Oh, I'd say they're as good as they've ever been, which is to say very, very good. The we regularly get contributions of small fixes that people discover, and we have got a few larger ones that are kind of in the pipeline. The
Okay.
camera controls that we just recently introduced were begun as an open source contribution. It turned out that some of the fiddly bits of doing the math required some internal help, but we're delighted to have the relationship we have with the third-party viewers. We collaborate on a lot of things with them.
Wolf Shiraboshi has asked, what's a third-party developer? These are the third-party viewers like Firestorm, and I'm not sure of the names of any of the others at the moment. Right. I'm sure people can suggest them.
Alchemy, Kokua, Black Dragon, Singularity, there are a bunch.
Right. So those are the ones we're talking about. Is there anything new or innovative you've noticed in the third-party viewer community that you think is worth advancing to include in a future version of the official Second Life viewer?
Yeah, there are a couple things. We're getting some very good improvements to how mesh uploads are done from that are getting a lot of contribution from outside folks. There's a developer out there working on putting support for emojis in text chat that we're very eager to get. So yeah, it's a I wouldn't say a routine event, but it's not an unusual event for us to see that someone has done something good in a third-party viewer, and we'll reach out to them and say, could you please help us with the port to our code? And it is extremely rare for that not to produce results.
Excellent. CB Axel says, would Safia please ask about Vulkan? I don't really care. I'm just tired of seeing the question in chat. Okay. What about Vulkan?
Vulkan is one of the technologies we're looking at very closely for replacing OpenGL in the to do the rendering with.
Mhm.
It's a very promising possibility, but no final decision has been made about how we're going to do that.
Okay. Also, Eltamar is asking, will Linux still be supported once we've gone to AWS?
Much to my dismay, Linux is not supported now, so it will still not be supported. Not by us, anyway. Some of the third-party viewers build Linux versions, but we don't. It's just
Okay.
a microscopic fraction of the user base. And what we found when we looked at it closely was not only were it's a lot of extra effort to build it and test it, and hardly anybody was using our work when we did it.
Okay, but Firestorm support it, so you've got that.
There are a couple of third-party viewers that support it. Yeah, there are a few, and more power to them. That's what open source is all about. Is that people can do that. There are a variety of reasons why that's a difficult market for us to support, starting with the fact that there's no such thing as Linux. There are dozens of different variations, and everybody thinks that the one they like is the only reasonable one. Unfortunately, that's, from our point of view, that's not much help.
We've got a wee free situation here.
Indeed.
Okay, so Chronocloud Cregan makes a very good point about the Linux question. She says hardly anybody uses it, but it has some power users who do a lot of developing. So yeah.
Yep, that's true. And but I want to. It's only fair for me to point out that about a year before we stopped supporting Linux, I put out a call and said, we're going to, unless we get contributions to fix some of the big problems with it, we're going to have to stop supporting this. And I didn't get any. None.
Right.
And then I said, we're not going to do it. If people contribute support, we'll integrate the code. And I don't get any contributions, which is disappointing.
It is disappointing, and it explains why it probably isn't around anymore. Now, I'm going to ask a long and quite complicated question, but I think you probably need to hear the whole thing. It comes from Mona Eberhardt, and it's about the new EU copyright directive coming into force in EU member states, Article 17. Is this a good question to ask you, or perhaps should I save it for the marketing team tomorrow, do you think? It's about the problems with uploads.
Safia, that's probably actually a question best tabled for.
Yeah, actually, neither. That would be a question for our lawyers.
Okay.
And so I'm not familiar with the subtleties of that. So I wouldn't even want to comment on it.
Okay,
and
thanks.
besides, the lawyers would whack me on the back of the head if I did.
Right. Okay.
And they'd be right, by the way.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. There's an interesting question here, from Anna Nova, and she asks, why hasn't Linden Lab created a marketplace app for people to shop Second Life through mobile devices while offline? Is it even possible to make such an app? Some people just can't get enough shopping.
I'm unfortunately for them, I'm not one of those people, but um, supporting shopping i- is definitely on mobile is definitely very much on our roadmap. Uh, the We would like to do that both by uh, having it directly natively supported in the mobile app if we
Mm,
could, and it's not clear that that's possible because of the way mobile apps are distributed. But it is certainly true that we would like to make the existing marketplace website much more mobile friendly, and at some point we will definitely do that.
Are you considering using object container streaming? Oh, that's another version of the Vulkan or Real Engine 5. Lots of
And it's
people.
also beyond my personal expertise, so I have no idea.
Okay. Will the development of the Sansar platform affect the future of Second Life? This is Len Blanc asking. Um, in terms of upgrades in any way, will the development of the Sansar platform, affect the future of Second Life in terms of upgrades in any way?
Well, the future development of Sansar is now entirely outside Linden Lab. They've gone
Mm,
off on they have their own corporate existence, and many of a bunch of our colleagues, former colleagues, went to continue that adventure, and we wish them the best of luck. But we're not going to be in a position in the future to share technology developments with them. I mean, we're not now, and we we can't now. Um, we're taking advantage of a bunch of work that they did as part of our cloud uplift because they were cloud native from the beginning,
mm,
and so we're learning lessons from their example and uh, getting some benefit from that, more than a little bit of benefit from that. Uh, so, but no, I don't expect developments on either to be moving back and forth between them uh, in the future.
mm. Caleb Kitt um, says, will this be improvements in group chats?
Oh, I hope so.
Hmm.
Um, right now, we're not focused on improving it. We're focused on uplifting it along with the rest of Second Life. So there's always some possibility that that alone will make some difference.
Mm,
We're acutely aware of that it um, it has limitations that are something then that we'd like to remove, but it's it's a hard problem.
yeah, Kathy Lynn says improvements in group chat. You mean I have to behave more? I don't know about that.
That's that's something for the governance team, not for me. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Whole different group, uh, and I admire the work that they do, but uh, couldn't do it myself.
Hmm. Phoenix Eldritch is an interesting question here. How feasible is it to give group chats extra channels and roles, like a light version of Discord?
Well, I'm not the right that particular framing of that question is unfortunate because I literally used Discord for the first time this morning. So I I am not in a position to compare and contrast those two. I'm
Right.
familiar with a great many other applications that do similar things, but that until this morning was not one of them. So there you go. If I think that when we get back to doing functional improvements to group chat and
Mhm.
other flavors of spatial chat and so forth, um, the we will be focused, I suspect, when we get to that, we will be focused on fixing the existing problems rather than splitting them up. Um, but for example, I'm not entirely clear why, uh, in what way having multiple channels per group is different than having multiple groups.
I think one of the I can explain a bit about this. It's if you take Joe Yardley's Berlin as an example,
Hmm.
people who are involved with 1920s Berlin end up joining multiple groups. Like there's one for residents, there's one for events, there's one for
Oh, sure, right. Yeah.
so you end up with, having to be a member of about 5 groups or something, and it's something Joe and I have talked about and asked about before, which is the idea of having kind of tiered groups so that when you join a group, you could be given, like, as access to a certain part of the group, but not the whole group. So
Right.
you
Right.
wouldn't be able to see the owners part of the group, but you would be able to see residents and events, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
I've sort of approached that from a different that set of problems from a slightly different perspective,
Mm,
and in that, um, what seems to have happened, and I wasn't here for the first 7 or 8 years of Second Life, so I'm a little bit of this is speculation on my part, but,
mm,
there we had this notion of groups, and a lot of things got added to them. So now you have groups whose primary purpose, or maybe only purpose, is to send out notices of sales or
mm,
notices of events. Um, you also have groups where people do a lot of conversing, right? The
mm,
Firestorm Support channel. I keep an eye on
mm,
that one from time to time. Um, the Because it's a good place to find out whether or not there are big problems going on in Second Life. Um,
Kitty
the
cat, I would recommend Kitty Cat's Addicts as well. Just for the chat is quite fun there.
Yeah, there are also groups that exist primarily to govern permissions on land,
Mm,
right? Um,
yes.
and the result is that groups are very complicated. The
Mm,
software is complex. It's doing a lot of different jobs all at the same time, and that's one of the reasons it's difficult to improve uh, the way it works. It if we have a in our Jira we have two issues that got created at the very beginning, SL1
mm,
and SL2.
yes.
SL2 is uh, things we would do if we had a time machine and could go back and change how we did it. It's actually I
Okay.
think it's actually written as invent a time machine so that we can go back and fix things. But uh,
Yeah,
restructuring groups is pretty high on my list of things I would do if SL2 ever gets done. Uh,
yeah,
because really, those are a lot of those could be completely different constructs, but figuring out how to change it into completely different constructs and tease all the existing usages apart is pretty
mm,
complicated. So, but right now, it's all about uplifting it. After we uplift it, there are some performance issues that we would want to attack before we added major new functionality.
right. I had, um I had a question from Anna Nova about chat, being turned off in, welcome areas like Korea 1, and could it be changed back? And I think actually ChronoCloud Kraken has answered that voice-enabled info hubs became too chaotic, and also a haven for griefing. I understand that's why the chat was turned off there. You were
Yeah,
getting
the
newcomers coming in
new
and being
users
rude.
have a tendency to find themselves in certain places, the
Mm,
welcome areas and info hubs,
mm,
especially because they don't know how to move around as well, and they end up
mm,
or they get kicked out by a security orb or something that they didn't know was there. And what we found talking to new users was that the behavior of people in voice in some of those places was off-putting. And obviously, we don't want to put off the new users, right? We all would
right.
rather there were lots of new users who could contribute
Mm,
to the diversity and liveliness of Second Life. Uh,
mm,
and of course, it's good for our business too. But uh, like like many of the decisions we make, that was a very data-driven decision. We looked at the data and said, if we send people through into areas that don't have voice, do they tend to stay longer than people who get sent into places that do have voice? Um,
mm.
and the decision was pretty clear.
Someone's changing the color of your chair, Oz.
Really?
I'm not
It's
sure
not
who
me.
this is. No.
Squeaky, are you messing with us?
They're highlighting your good jacket. Okay, couple more questions. Maxwell Graf says, this is something I've heard discussed before. Could we ever get menus and palettes and windows that we can pull off to drag to a second monitor and free up the main viewer window?
Well, I'll give you the answer I give to almost any question that begins, will we ever get something? And that is maybe. Um,
Yeah,
sometimes
actually,
the answer
mm,
is hopefully, and in this case, I would say hopefully.
mm,
But that's unfortunately uh, a, a really big, complicated, difficult thing to do, given
mm,
the existing um, viewer architecture. Uh, Now, of course, we could go away and not give you any improvements from the viewer for a couple of years, um, and then give you an entirely new viewer with a new user interface that's completely different from what you were used to. But the last time we did that, it didn't work out all that well. People weren't that happy with it. Uh, I
yeah,
joined just as that was happening, and I got to um, Q Linden was who was running most of viewer development, or maybe even all of viewer development around that time, said the best thing about Viewer 2 was that it immediately changed Viewer 1.29 from the worst viewer we'd ever built to the best viewer we'd ever built. So,
yeah.
uh, so we're a little bit gun shy when it comes to let's start over and do everything fresh. And
Mm,
besides, we'd rather give you incremental improvements that work well. I would love to solve the window space problem, um,
mm,
and I would love to be able to get some things out of the viewer into their own windows. That's
mhm,
that's a great goal. Unfortunately, given our UI building toolkit, it's a it's a difficult one. So we haven't ever quite decided. What we need to do when we look at a feature is, what's the benefit that users are going to get from this feature? Is it going to make Second Life users' lives significantly better in some way? Is it going to benefit builders, or is it going to
mm.
benefit landowners, or is it going to benefit shoppers? Whatever it is, there are lots of different angles to look at it from, uh, and uh, and how difficult is it going to be? How risky is it? right?
Mm.
And we have to sort of juggle those and we do that literally continuously. We say, oh, okay, we've got some people freeing up as this project is done. What's the next most important thing for them to work on? And we look at that problem. Um, this is one where we would have to make a big bet for a long time at relatively high risk. So it tends not to get done.
I've got a question from Caitlin Rayner who says that updating Second Life is great, but I have some friends who struggle because they use older computers still, and they have issues like overheating and crashing a lot. So if you upgrade it further, will my friends not be able to play Second Life in future? I think that one gets a sad answer, doesn't it?
The answer is I hope that won't be true.
Mm.
But there is a limit. I mean, those of you who have, you know, pretty nice systems that perform very well, are not getting new features as fast as you would if we didn't have to think about the people who have really, really old systems that are just terrible.
Mm.
And we have backed off on. I mean, we don't officially support Windows 7 anymore. We don't support Windows XP or Vista anymore. Because the effort of doing that, both in terms of making sure, fixing things, but it also meant that we had to test on each of those things, right? So we'd get,
Right.
one set of changes and we have to test it on a whole bunch of different platforms,
Mm.
right? So Linux is another example of that, actually.
Yeah.
So it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fortunately, computers are getting cheaper and cheaper. Hopefully someday the two
This is
lines will
true.
cross and you'll be able to upgrade to something better.
This is true. Sarah Emor asks, do you know who the bot avatars that pop into regions quickly and daily? Are they part of performance monitoring team employed by Linden Lab?
No, they're not.
Okay.
Do I know who they are? I know
Mm.
about a bunch of different possible sources of bots,
Mm.
but they're not us. We do our performance monitoring by looking at the data on the back end, not by
Right.
your viewer actually reports if it's well behaved. Actually reports quite a bit of performance data to us so that we can look at statistical information about how viewers in general perform. And
Mm.
where they perform better and where they don't, and so forth. We look at that quite a lot.
Right.
Yes, the
Okay.
world. I agree, and the comment that the map could use some love. That's very high on my list.
Mm.
After Uplift.
You should grab the people who are map keen. There's we did a Designing World show at the Museum of Second Life Maps recently, and they have some amazing maps, and they really know a lot about how maps can work. It's awesome.
Yeah, I just got a landmark to that, and I haven't. It's in my folder of places to go visit. I'm looking forward to it.
I really recommend it. And Juliana and Dragonia will welcome you with open arms.
Well, I might go on an alt just because
Okay.
you wander around as a Linden.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's fun. People are usually excited to see you,
Hmm.
which is wonderful. But it means that you spend a lot of time chatting with them, which is great up to a point. But if what you wanted to do was look deeply at the exhibits on maps of Second Life, it's a
Mm.
little harder. So sometimes I go in stealth mode.
I don't blame you at all. Okay, I'm just looking through questions. Will Second Life support Xbox controllers in the future? Asks Michael Daniel Austin.
The future is a long time away. We don't have that on the roadmap right now.
Len LeBlanc asks, will there be any improvement with Animesh land impact? I think that's something people would really love to know, because there's lots of people who would like to use more Animesh.
You know, the whole subject of land impact is a complicated one. And at one point, a while back, I internally tried to get a project going to completely revamp how we calculate land impact to provide um, more incentives to high quality content, as I'm sure you all appreciate. Um, User generated content is one of the great benefits of Second Life. It's the key. I think it's one of the keys to the success of Second Life, and we are completely committed to it. But it's also something of a challenge, right? High performing AAA games do not give the game designers, and especially not the programmers, uh, and the artists, unlimited license about what they can do. They are given a texture budget. They are given a transparency budget. They are given a, vertices budget. They are, they are told, you will make this look fantastic, but you will do it at the following very low cost, right? We can't do that. And land impact is a little bit of sort of how we encourage high quality content. But there are some things about our formulas that actually sometimes provide incentives in the other direction. Um, we we have since kind of morphed that project into providing better tools for people to understand the performance impact of what what's going on. That is what
Right.
we and I'm not really sure how the presentation of this is going to come out, but what we'd really like to be able to do is tell a landowner or even a visitor, um, here, this thing or this combination of things in the scene you're looking at, these are the things that are responsible for the rendering lag that you're going through. This is why it takes a long time to draw you, right? Or to draw that avatar or those trees or whatever it is, right?
Right.
And try to give people more, because changing the formula for land impact is very difficult to do, impossible to do in a completely backwards compatible way. I mean, if it was completely backwards compatible, you haven't changed anything. So, but we are trying to think about how to give people better visibility into what content is efficient, and of course, people are already really good at judging what content looks good. So we think giving them better tools to understand the efficiency of content uh, will be helpful.
I've got an interesting question here from Liz Wilmer. Will it ever be possible to view and organize one's inventory offline, as in perhaps via the SL website? You can log in, buy Linden's shop, but you can't see your inventory. And she says it would be so helpful. I have to agree.
I agree too.
Can it be done?
In theory, sure. It just hasn't been top of the list.
Okay.
But it does come up. It's one of those things that we think about. It's just that, again, it's a pretty large project, and so it's a big investment, and it's definitely possible that we could do something like that. When we would do something like that, I not really my call.
After uplift.
Certainly not until after uplift.
Yeah. but maybe Liz could put it on the Jira, and then people could support it.
Search first. I'm pretty sure that there's already some there, but yeah, doesn't hurt. We can catch duplicates.
Okay, I'm going to take one final question from Kenny Luckless. Kenny Lex Luckless, and then I have a couple of questions for you. Any chance for SVG support where the price can be based on complexity? So a small SVG text can cost only 1 Linden to upload. I don't know what an SVG text is, so maybe you could tell me.
SVG is scalable vector graphics. It's a language that you can use that is then turned into drawings.
Right.
You can do SVG on media on a prim, for example.
Right.
Even now. We have talked about expanding application of SVGs, and I forgot to leave my monitor unlocked. I'm not sure from that capsule question exactly what that particular person had in mind. So it would be very helpful to have that written up as a feature suggestion in the Jira.
Right.
And I should comment about how to request features.
Yes, please.
I read a lot of feature suggestions and I really enjoy it. I get a lot out of it. We get some good ideas that way. We get a lot of duplication. We get some spectacularly bad ideas. Some of them aren't bad ideas for reasons that should be obvious to users. There's no harm in that. But it's really helpful if people will take the time to be very, very thorough, right? We get a huge number of feature suggestions and bug reports, I guess, where people assume that we already know exactly what they're talking about. Why don't you do this, that? And that's the whole thing, right? And take a few minutes, maybe write it up in a document and give it to a friend who doesn't use Second Life and say, do you understand what I'm asking? And if the answer is no, add some text. It's free.
That's a really good suggestion.
Yeah, it would be tremendously helpful, actually, because it is not at all unusual for us to get together. We do a big new feature triage once a week. We often look at them in between those big meetings, but the ones that seem like they're worth reading as a group, we'll sit down and read them as a group and talk about what out of the suggestion is a good idea and what the problems with it are, and we either import them or sometimes mark them as duplicates or whatever. But it's often kind of a guessing game trying to figure out just exactly what is somebody asking for here. And sometimes we send it back and say, could you please expand on this, because it sort of seems worth following. But frankly, sometimes we just say this is so completely vague that it's not even worth doing that, and we just let it go.
So make sure you write good JIRAs.
Right. Just just think about how your 8th grade English teacher would react to it. And did you really write a good exposition here?
I am going to ask one last question and then we're going to stop. And I'm really sorry, everyone.
Ooh.
I know. Well, I'm not sorry for Oz, because Oz has answered questions very patiently for an hour and a half. But I was going to say, how does A question here from Rain Flower Child. I would love to know how parcel traffic counts really work. Does it reset every day or once a week? How does it work?
I'll be right up front with you. I have no idea.
Okay.
Second Life is really big and really complicated, and that just isn't something I've never had occasion to actually dig into the details and learn. Um, so I'm afraid I don't know. I know it broadly speaking, new data counts more than old data, but
Mhm.
how quickly the old data decays and what the difference is, I've never looked into it.
Okay. Well, I was just going to ask you one final question of my own, which is, have you had chance to explore the birthday much yet?
Not
And are you
enough.
planning to?
I've spent maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours wandering around.
Mm,
I haven't yet taken the little pod car ride. Um, there's as is always the case with the Second Life birthday celebrations, everywhere I go, it's just astonishing the cool stuff that people have built.
mm,
And I spend a bunch of time looking around, sometimes trying to figure out what I'm looking at, but it's really great. But things are pretty busy right now, and I just haven't had as much time as
mm. We'll
um,
make a plea to give Oz some time to explore the birthday.
oh, I always make sure that I I explore the birthday regions. It's great fun.
Mm.
Um,
Okay, we're going to draw this to an end now. This is I'd like to start by thanking Oz so much for talking and answering so many questions. And I apologize to people whose questions didn't get asked. We had some fantastic questions, both asked and unasked. Um, so thank you, audience. Thank you, Oz. It's been brilliant. And thank you to all the moles and Lindens who've been working behind the scenes.
well, thank you for helping us to do this communication. It's energizing to uh, to interact with the residents. It's the best part of this job, um, and and this is a great job. I mean,
Yeah.
let's not be let's not be let's not pull any punches here. This is the best place to work I've ever worked. There's no question about it, and I really love it. Um,
Mm,
and I love events like this. They're fun. So I look
mm.
forward to doing it again sometime.
Well, certainly next year, I'll book you for I'll book you now for that.
I'm looking forward to it.
Okay.
Hopefully, the I won't have lost a third round of Bid the Lindens bald.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Tomorrow, I'm going to be talking to the marketing team. So there'll be a group of us on stage. And
Boy, they're
and then
fantastic.
on yeah.
They're just fantastic.
And
Great
then
group.
on Friday, I've got the moles collectively with hopefully Patch to keep an eye on them.
Another
So
fun gang, actually.
yeah.
Yep, we'll be there.
Okay, so good night, everyone. Thank you for coming. Good afternoon to people, and good morning to the Australians who joined us and New Zealanders. Bye for now.